My relationship to hip hop starts in 1983 with my crew, the Seattle Circuit Breakers. And this is how we did it. This is me in 85 in New York, and I just busted into the circle and called these guys out. And this is my ceiling today, my office ceiling. Still has a bunch of hip hop album covers. This is the B-Boy reunion we have every year in Hawaii. Run DMC's first album cover. Dr. Dre's first album cover with the Wreckin' Crew. And these are all original album covers from the 80s. Rocksteady Crew's album. Roxanne Shante, the original album. And that also has her signature. I got it from B Girl B, which was an all-female hip-hop event that I participated in Minneapolis. And this is Kool Herc. I have his autograph. And then this is D-Rock, the leader of our crew, and also known as DJ Mr. Supreme in Seattle. This is a graffiti I did from back in the day. Kept it all that time.
For me, the blueprint of hip-hop is b-boying, MCing, DJing, graffiti, and beatboxing. Those are the 5 fundamental or foundational elements of hip-hop. And we're going to look at creative writing through those 5 elements.
So I wanted to point out that neither of these films were feature films. I did not see WildStyle or Beat Street in the theater. I don't know if it came to a theater near me. The one I did see in the theater was Breakin'. But my crew member D-Rock was like, you gotta see Beat Street and WildStyle. If you're connected to the scene, you saw these movies. If you weren't, you probably had no interest in them. So another really important thing was Michael Jackson, Motown 25. He did his moonwalk across the stage. And that's when everybody kind of started to know what a moonwalk was and what breakdancing was.
42nd Street, 42nd between 8th and Broadway.
Right.
Which was, for us, that was the mecca of moviedom. And we knew that we made this movie, we just wanted this film to play on 42nd Street for 1 year.
That's right.
That was our highest aspiration.
7 Grandmasters, whatever, just like any film.
Yeah, just like all those films on 42nd Street. And if you guys are New Yorkers and you remember what the Deuce was like in those days, you could pay like about $3, $4. You could sit in the theater and watch 3 or 4 movies, cats running across your feet. Everybody was smoking something in the theaters in those days, but that was our audience, you know.
That was the goal.
That was the goal. But a lot of things that happened after we made this movie, we had no idea they were gonna go down like this, right? It's crazy.
Once you get in the middle of it, it's like
it's a snowball.
Things were happening while we were shooting the movie that were influencing the actual world that it was depicting.
That's right. And a lot of what was actually happening ended up inspiring what ended up on screen in the movie.
Exactly. So you can't separate any of it. So
that's right. Or anybody had actually,
I would say 1 year.
Roughly, but it was, things had begun to happen.
Mm-hmm.
But we were taking you back to that point just
to show that
before, so we could illustrate, what had just happened and what was about to happen. Of course, we had no idea that hip hop would become a global, multi-billion-dollar youth culture, the most dominant youth culture in history. But
you know what I wanted to talk a little bit about avant-garde art and how deeply involved both of us were. What was the cutting edge of experimental art at that time, experimental music, and how this film was kind of an expression of that for both of us.
Yeah, that's true. Because also at the time when we were making WildStyle, you guys got to remember, if you heard any rap records at this time, you might have heard the Sugar Hill Gang.
Here's Wonder Mike, Hank, and Master G, the Sugar Hill Gang.
Now what you hear is not a test, I'm rapping to the beat.
But rap was not even a blip on the map. And there was a place in the Soho at the time called The Kitchen where people came and did weird things with instruments and performance art, it was called, but we saw a similarity in what this culture was.
And you came out with a train, which, you know, we call the soup train, which was...
Yeah, the Campbell soup train I painted, which was, I mean, as I was learning about, you know, pop art and figuring that whole thing out, and, you know, I had read a lot about Andy Warhol, who was somebody that was a big influence on me. And my last train that I painted on the New York City subway was the Campbell soup train, which was like a homage to Andy, but it was also my calling card to the art world.
So he does this soup train, which is his last train and his entrance into the art world. So that's really telling a story with a piece of art. So if you really wanted to get into it, though, you'd have to look at how that train, how that whole car compares with other whole cars that he did, and why it's different. Does it represent a shift in his life to show some type of biography? How does the art actually talk about the biography? So really go into detail, you know, the colors, the styles, the types of lettering. Does anything represent a shift in his art that would function as memoir or biography? How does it relate to popular culture? What does that say about a great graffiti artist moving into the art world with a Campbell soup can on a train? And what does the art say that words cannot?
But I think another thing to point out, which we talked about before, was the state that the Bronx was in. The Bronx was the world's most famous ghetto at the time. Not far from where we were filming scenes like this, the president had come
to the Charlotte Street area, which was the most desolate area of the Bronx, where you had like 6 blocks, 7 blocks square of solid rubble. Yeah. There was nothing left, and there would be people actually living amidst this rubble.
It was deplorable.
And, you know, once you start to lose the basic services in the neighborhood, once everybody leaves that can hold a job, what you're left with
is, whoa, not a lot.
It's rough. So really rough. And this was real life to the people and the kids that a lot of the people that performed in our movie were, I would say, almost all of them lived right in that scene, which is right where Rodney C. lived. Mm-hmm. You know, this is not like we drove someplace to find terrible looking places. Mm-hmm. This is really the way that neighborhood looked at that time.
Yeah, it was a shame.
And if you go to that location now, you'll find suburban homes with little lawns and little gates out in front. I was there last year. I drove around there for a half hour. I couldn't even find the place. It's so different. It's like Twilight Zone.
Yeah.
You want to go to the yard?
Thank goodness.
Yeah, I know. Thank goodness is right. They built it up a little bit.
Yeah.
So making something out of nothing is sort of one myth that is created by hip-hop. And when we say myth, we don't necessarily mean something that's untrue. We mean that there's a story that's used to explain the belief systems of the group, or a sort of embodiment of that group's ideas. And we need to think about how these films are shaped by these myths, but they're also shaping the myth. So we'll start watching Beat Street.
English class. No, I'm serious. No kidding. I used to trace his old DC comics because he was so boring. That's why I figured out all the streaks and blurs and shit. Yo, man, not too high in that cloud, all right? You're gonna go over that phase 2 up there. Oh, come on, I ain't stupid.
What's phase 2?
Phase 2 is the guy who practically invented the idea of burners. Before that, everything was just his little tags. Oh, tag is your name. And that's a burner.
So we have our main character learning to do graffiti in English class, which is boring. So graffiti is not boring. It's dangerous, it's risky, it's not sedentary, it's not rigid like English. He learns from DC Comics. Comics are literature. Streaks and blurs, do they convey meaning? Is there a genealogy to the streaks and blurs? Are comics art or literature? Do the pictures of the word tell the story? Zorro from WildStyle is also a comic. Phase 2 is an artist. He now has a style named after him, so hip hop is developing icons. Are these forms like phase 2, like sentences and paragraphs? Are we forming a canon here? Then we have tags and burners, which could function as categories like essays or letters or arguments. So now we're going to look at a clip from Style Wars, the documentary. And I want you to think about if the Bronx can be a character. What about the train? And how is the train and the sounds of the trains and the spray cans, how are you? And actually, could the films be somewhat of a memoir for the trains that no longer have graffiti on them?
Well, if you're feeling alright and you think you're on, somebody let me know. Well, everybody in the place put a whistle in your face, screaming out and say, yo, hey! You don't stop. I rock the rhythm that makes your finger pop. I said, hip hop, thanks a lot. Come on, everybody, give me what you got. I'm gonna tell you a little story about the Sugar Hill Gang with the pow pow boogie and a big bang bang.
They call themselves writers because that's what they do. They write their names, among other things, everywhere. Names they've been given or have chosen for themselves. Most of all, they write in and on subway trains, which carry their names from one end of the city to the other. It's called bombing. And it has equally assertive counterparts in rap music and breakdancing.
Screaming out and say, I am somebody.
Graffiti writing in New York is a vocation. Its traditions are handed down from one youthful generation to the next. To some, it's art. To most people, however, it is a plague that never ends. A symbol that we've lost control.
I'm Detective Bernie Jacobs. I, in conjunction with my partner, Detective Jim McHugh, are the crime prevention coordinators for the New York City Transit Police Department. Graffiti, as the name itself, is not an art. Graffiti is the application of a medium to a surface. I will show you graffiti, such as the letters on the end of that car directly in back of me. Is that an art form? I don't know. I'm not an art critic. But I can sure as hell tell you that that's a crime.
At the Grand Concourse 149th Street station in the Bronx, graffiti writers gather at what they call the writer's bench.
Yes, sir.
saying that the kids run the subways, that the system is out of control, that 15 or 16-year-old kids are running the system, and that graffiti is a symbol of that.
Nah, I ain't running the system.
Hell yeah.
I'm bombing the system. They're trying to make it look like graffiti writers break windows and everything. It ain't even like that. You know who be doing that, man? Niggas who be high when they come from school is the ones who break the window.
And it's in the graffiti artist's favor to be as cool, calm, and collected about putting his art on the train as he can. You know, he wants to get in and get out without even being noticed, except for the work that's going to come out to the public, that Monday.
Yeah, we gotta start to rock some straight legs.
Some came out of that, right?
That's about the third scheme piece I did this shit. And that's the TikTok I did in Gun Hill. What'd you do last night? We did 2 whole.
So the definition of graffiti is writing or drawing, scribbled, scratched, or sprayed illicitly on a wall or other surface in a public space. We need to think about what hip-hop is doing in these public spaces and the defamation of them, really. So we look at who are the real vandals. The kids are saying, we're not the ones who are breaking the windows on the train. And so that's another thing we have to think about. Art is a plague that never ends. These kids aren't running the system, they're bombing the system. And it's a symbol that we have lost control. So who are we? Who are they? What is crime? And if graffiti artists are writers, then what is writing? Basically, hip-hop is undermining the whole structure of things.
Call people that hang out windows and watch trains riders, man. You gotta write, you gotta do the action, man. You know, you gotta go out there, rack up. You gotta go out and paint and be called an outlaw at the same time.
The thing about Lee and this is that people have to know how real it was.
Yes, that's important. That's important.
Just to give you an idea of the kind of character Lee was, the first day in which we started shooting WildStyle, after I talked him into coming in, and you'll see a close-up of his face coming right up. Lee Kino showed up on the set with makeup all over the top of his nose. And he has a very, very particular scar that runs across the top of his nose. And I said, Lee, what do you have this makeup on for? And he said, are you kidding? I don't want the cops to recognize me. You know, when the film comes out, he was hoping the makeup would disguise who he really is. That's a fairly naive concept for anybody. And I said, Lee, your face is going to be 30 feet tall on the screen. How can you possibly hope to disguise from anyone who you really are? Problems with the production. The other thing that happened was Lee Quinones did not show up. He felt at the last minute that being depicted painting in the yards was against, in a way, his graffiti beliefs.
I think that a lot of this was based on, in actuality, Lee had a very sacred approach to graffiti, and the yards were very sacred ground.
Right.
And he, in real life, never, felt like the act of him painting and doing graffiti was something that nobody should actually see. So there was a lot of realism that motivated what we were doing in terms of our acting. Lee was never actually seen in a yard. That was a part of Lee's deep, passionate belief that he just would never want to be seen painting or in the yard because it was just so sacred to him. It's just hard to kind of articulate.
We chipped away at his sacred cows a little bit.
Yes,
when he first came on, he didn't even want to play the part in the movie, period.
That's true.
And we only convinced him. We spent an entire year trying to convince him to play this part. and he was not going to play the part until like a week before we shot the movie.
Right.
And we sort of convinced him on two things. What do you remember what those two things were?
I'm sure money had some.
Money. So what I was going to say is that, you know, he wouldn't do the part, and I took him aside and I said, you know, there's a makeout scene in this movie, and and Lady Pink, you know, your girlfriend, by the way, is definitely going to play this part.
Yeah, Lee's girlfriend.
And if you don't step up to bat, some actor who's probably a tall, handsome strap, he's going to come in and he's going to be making out with your girlfriend.
That's right. So that was incentive. That's right. Lee and Lady Pink were an actual item before we made the movie, so that was incentive. You did it back then, was doing it, and then you spent a great deal of your time watching it go by. And there were several spots around the city where writers would congregate. The most famous might have been Writer's Bench, 149th Street train station on the IRT. And you would go there and meet writers and exchange tags with them, and it brought a lot of people together. I mean, it was unusual at the time that a white guy like Zephyr would be hanging out with a black guy or a Puerto Rican guy. There wasn't a lot of that kind of connection going on in the city, but through
except for
graffiti, people came together.
Where it happened.
Race had it was like, whoa, that's what you wrote? I've been dying to meet this guy. I don't care if he's white, blue, green.
Didn't matter if you were Brooklyn or Bronx. It didn't matter if you were white or black.
Right.
People hung. It depended on what you did on the trains. That's what counted.
It did. That was all that mattered.
So we have two more myths now. So one is you gotta be authentic, and the other is that hip hop brings people together. So you see that in almost every element, and almost every pioneer will talk about that aspect of hip hop. So if hip hop is offering us an alternative to English, then we can learn graffiti on the trains with a different canon. And we have to start to think about these aspects of graffiti. Do the other four elements follow similar principles, forms, precepts, and myths? So what about, do they have performance, participation, risk, authenticity, unity, style? So we'll look at Busy Bee's performance again and sort of think about that a little bit.
Somebody, anybody, help me scream! Around New York City, all years around, my name is known all over the town. So boy, people here love the way I run my game. They can't wait to see me make the hell of my own. Busy Bee is my name, and that's a fact. And they hate me with a stick or back. Now I walk around, it's like to me. In the MC world, there's no better than me. Man, I'm better than gold, older than grass. The best MC like ever had. When I came to earth, by the media ride, they didn't wanna give me a try.
In one tragic moment, that world was destroyed. But there was one survivor.
But they heard my voice could make your dance, so they finally bailed out, gave me a chance. Then I rocked the house so viciously, all the girls is talking about the beat that we need to get down. Stop that messing around because I'm busy is in your life. I said being an MC just wasn't my choice, but I'm too ground, I had to go this boy. I was too hot, I handle too cold to hold because MC said for my control.
So now we're going to look at the Beat Street Battle. And really something important about this is that it's not rehearsed. It's not practiced. It probably is here for the movie. But generally, a b-boy battle is a skill base that has to be applied depending on whatever your opponent gives to you. I compare this to surfing, but it's different. You're responding to the wave, not so much the music or the other opponent. So you could see that as a kind of blueprint. But I think this dynamic versus static knowledge with improv is a really important blueprint of hip hop that runs pretty much through all the elements. Now there's a composition going here. You'll see that each breaker comes out, they do their top rock or their up rock, and then they go down into their footwork, and then they do their power move, and then finally they do a freeze, which calls out the next breaker. And the next breaker is going to try to top their move. And a lot of you talked about, you know, the kind of making fun. So this is a simulated gang fight, right? And the moves have a genealogy. They come from all different forms of martial arts and former dances and African style dances, gymnastics. There's a lot combined in there. So that's a genealogy you could talk about. And for your bio, what does this say about the person? What does their performance say about them? So what do we get from breakdance? Dynamic, responsive, reactionary, spontaneous, synchronized, and improvisation, which is similar to graffiti, performance, participation, risk, authenticity, unity, style. And how does this compare to English, since Ramo made that connection, which is static, polite, planned, perfection, rhetoric, or persuasion?
So we can see how these things start to merge together throughout the 5 elements. Some of the aspects of graffiti, or most of them, do go right hand in hand with breakdancing. And also, you know, breakdancing involves risk, obviously, authenticity, participation, some of these things, style, very important. And then we have these components. You know, you have the streaks and blurs, the phase 2, all of that. But in breakdancing, you have the cipher, the up rock, the footwork, the power move, or the freeze. Now, how does this compare to English? A cover of a book, an epigraph, words, sentences, paragraphs, conclusion, dedication, that kind of thing. Now we're going to watch an interview with Crazy Legs.
The Rock Steady crew, you just saw a little bit of them in Beat Street. We have Baby Love, Kuriaki, Buck 4, Devious Doze, Prince Ken Swift, and over here the leader, Crazy Legs. Have another welcome for all these folks. What's the significance of breakdancing to the kids that you've been growing up with and you've been going to school with?
Breakdancing is like an own form, you know, its own original style. It's come from the hip hop scene, which deals with graffiti, rapping, DJing, and breakdancing. It's like a message of telling people that we could all come together, like we're together now, and we live in different parts of the city, each of us, and it brings people together to dancing instead of fighting against each other.
Yeah, that's what Harry Belafonte said, that this has replaced the gang confrontations that you used to find all over New York City.
Definitely.
Yeah. What else is it doing for that part of New York?
It's giving people a chance to get up in society. They see us.
Yeah.
Right? We getting up there.
It's an art form.
So another myth from b-boying is street dancing instead of street fighting.
So we have to make note here that they are referencing Belafonte already, who created Beat Street, as someone who's promoting this message of replacing street fighting with street dancing. We have to consider if this journalist is shaping the conversation, is shaping hip-hop, or is hip-hop shaping the literature. So just always be conscious of how the story is being told and by whom.
And again, you have unity, brings people together, and the type of upward mobility. Now for me, we're going to watch a clip coming up that I was recently dancing. And I wouldn't really say that I'm telling a story, but I would say that it's an exchange of energy, that's here. And the excitement comes from the not knowing what to expect. And also that it does bring people together. Here's people I'd never known, and they're hugging me within, an hour of being around them. And here too, in New York City, just dancing with people I don't know. So now we're going to look at Kool Herc. He is father of hip hop. Said that 40 years later, he believed that hip hop had achieved Martin Luther King's dream of bringing white and black kids together. So we see this theme, it runs through almost every pioneer